Welcome to Garden Tips. Flower where you root. Winter gardening. The champion of the cold weather plants. Our kale has been uncovered and it's been in the mid to lower 20s every night, and it gets up to about 40 in the day. The sun finally decided to come out. I thought this would be a great time to talk about some winter gardening tips. I've been asked several times recently what zone I'm in. And it's really less about your zone than about the temperature. And where I'm at, northeastern Oklahoma, it was zone 7A/B, depending on what map you looked at. And it appears some government agency needed some work to do, so they kind of changed the zones anyhow. The most critical is your first frost date and your last frost date. To be a successful winter gardener, you want to keep that soil temperature warm. By adding the deep mulch as insulation, that soil temperature stays good and warm. Providing a little protection with some plastic, some little totes. You'd be surprised at what you can grow. I can feel the heat coming off of that. It's amazing how fast the broccoli, the cabbage, the cilantro, the carrots, the spinach, and the beets have all come up very, very fast. And then in front of that, we've got lettuce, turnips, and spinach, all sprouting very well. The little older beets, turnips, spinach, radishes, and carrots, they don't even know it's winter. Now, I'm not going to completely open these up, since I'm going to have to cover them back up in a couple hours. And today is warm enough, I don't want these to cook. I'm just opening it up enough so they can get some air. You were here with me when we planted on the shortest day of the year. We've already got our first sprouts coming up. I know, what in the world? I had a friend of mine give me a little pane of glass the other day. Looks like that's been in a barn. It's kind of dirty. But let's do something fun with that. We've shown that you can grow underneath the plastic tote. Let's see if we can't just grow under a piece of glass. Now we're going to have to modify the ground just a little bit. And since we're putting a deep mulch in, and I put these piles in, kind of hills and valleys, got me to thinking. Let's modify this a little bit, and then let's plant. And whether this is just a piece of glass, or if you had a little frame with a little plastic taped around it, it works exactly the same way. And when it gets warm, we'll lift it off. And when it gets cold, we'll set it down. When it gets real cold, we can just cover that up with a little bit more insulation. And we'll let some stuff flower where they root. Speaking of flower where you root, and dealing with what you have at hand, we're going to do like Marie did down in Jamaica. We're going to modify what we have for our own use. Marie can only garden in containers. All she has is rocks. Her soil is very poor. But that's a great example of using what you have, flowering where you can root. Marie, thank you for inspiring me, showing us all what's possible with very limited resources. And that's what we're going to do here. I've got one pane and a bunch of wood chips. And this is going to work perfect, because how do you plant in the deep mulch? You have to get down to bare soil. And by getting down to bare soil, I'll even this out, and we'll make a nice seal around this pane, or your plastic screen, or whatever topping you want to use. So let's take a look. Keep using this to measure out my area. We have sort of an idea where it needs to be, so we're just going to start moving this, leveling this out and getting down to bare soil. This would be the exact same if you were using plastic bags full of leaves, if you were using plastic bags full of lawn clippings. You could even use cardboard boxes full of soil, or wood chips, or leaves, or anything else you had. The point is, you're going to want some kind of insulating barrier around your bed. Okay, I can take a little more out of that corner. That'll work perfect. We've moved enough, we've got it lower on the south side. And that makes a nice little cold frame. Let's go ahead and get the rest of the wood chips out of the bottom. This gives you a sense of how deep this mulch actually is right now. And by August, you won't be able to tell we put mulch down here hardly. You want to pile it in 4 inches thick or thicker. I like to pile it in thicker. You'd be surprised at how fast this goes. So what do we want to plant? Obviously, we want to plant cold hardy crops. Radishes. If you've never planted anything, come along and plant with me. Get some radishes in the ground. They germinate the fastest. You're going to have some great success. And the first time you have a success in the garden, makes you want to continue to garden. So I'm just going to make a couple rows here. We're going to do like Ruth Stout. I'm only making rows so I know where they're at. Set our seeds on top. Just pat those in. Good soil contact. That's all you need. We're also going to plant a cornucopia of carrots. I like these different color ones. They're fun. Main thing with carrots is you want to make sure they don't dry out. And in this kind of weather, you don't have to worry about that. So we're just going to Ruth Stout. We're just going to pat the surface. Good soil contact. That's all they need. And this soil is good and damp. And then, of course, has anybody ever said you can't have enough beets? So we want round 5 or 6 or whatever this is. I'm not even going to put those in rows. I'm just going to sprinkle those across the top. Pat that in. We'll see what we get. Now I am going to take just a little bit of these pine needles. Sprinkle that over the top just lightly. Now this is just light. That'll help hold that moisture. And even though we've uncovered everything else, I'm going to go ahead and cover this up. We're going to let the sun warm this soil up. And by doing it this way, when it gets real cold, we just put a little mulch around the edges and seal that up. So for your winter gardening tips, remember, it's less about the zone and more about your weather. Keep your first frost date and your last frost date in mind. January, February, into March, the more cold hardy your plants are, the more successful you're likely to be. A layer of mulch keeps your ground warm. The warmer the ground is, the better your plants will do. And some basic protection. A plastic tote, some plastic over a ladder, works real fine as a cold frame. You can get real fancy, but you don't need to. Use what you have, where you're at, and you can flower where you root. You can do this too. And if you want to join me for a wrap up for last year, click that link right there and I'll meet you right back in the garden. And until next time, remember, take care of yourself, take care of your family, and God bless you. Come on, let's plant.
Let's go plant garden.